important. They know what their leader has done. They're taught if they leave, they'll become the darkest people on earth. And that's just not true. Father took over the leadership of the church. He told us this is a new era.
That's when the girls were getting younger and younger.
Family members started to just disappear. That's when we heard that there is a place called Zion. Only the people the Lord told him could go there would be allowed. He brought his young wives there and said, "You boys are going to be tempted towards my young wives."
Was there ever an instance where a father or a mother was like, no, you can't have my 13-year-old daughter?
It got to where there was not girls on the ranch over 13 years old. It looked like there were hundreds of cop cars out there blocking us off. So that's when I knew something way bigger was up. We thought they were just trying to destroy our religion. It was pretty clear that something bad was happening to us. People are telling me that FBI is giving my father drugs.
Did you have any idea it was going to lead to what it led to?
This is so much worse than I could have ever thought it was, even though I thought things were getting really crazy. And that's when the bottom of my world dropped out.
Hey there guys, welcome back to New World Old Soul. Thanks so much for being here. On today's episode, we have Rachel Blackmore, who's been here previously. You are our first return guest.
Yep.
And with her is her brother, Ammon. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Ammon has a book that is currently available, correct?
Yes.
What is the name of that book?
Texas Raid.
Yes.
And we just launched it last month, April.
And where can we find this? We'll leave a link down below for all.
Okay, I have it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Those are the two main places.
Wonderful. I sat and read your book last night, and it was so good. So I read Rachel's book in one sitting, which we'll also link that down below, and then I just read your book in one sitting, and it's fascinating to hear two different sides of what occurred during the FLDS raids.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So let's start from the very beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and the early years of your life?
Yeah. I was born in Sandy, Utah. Blackmore and Jeffs, Barbara Barlow. I'm Rachel's full sibling and really loved life there in Salt Lake, Sandy area. We lived in the mouth of Little Cottonwood Canyon, and the mountain was just right across the road, so we loved to go hiking up the mountain, and felt like we lived a pretty normal life as children, having fun with each other, playing, going to school, at that private school, Alta Academy at my grandfather's, and lived there in Salt Lake area for the first 8 years of my life. So I'm 6.5 years younger than Rachel, right?
Yeah. And he was like, I love tending him. He was the cutest little child ever.
He was like your little
Baby.
person you had. So then how did life, so that was the first 8 years. When did things kind of shift for you guys in your childhood?
Moving to Short Creek was kind of a big thing, probably bigger to Rachel than me because I was 8 and it was just a fun new place to go, new adventures, new people to meet. And to me, things didn't change a whole lot at first when we moved down there. It was more after my grandfather died, when Father took over the leadership of the church, that things really shifted gears. And even he came and told us, this is a new era. We're starting a new era in your lives. Everything's going to change. So we didn't know what he meant.
Yeah. How did you guys feel about your father becoming the prophet? Because wasn't your grandfather supposed to be the last prophet? Hadn't you always been told that?
Yeah, Father always said grandfather's the last prophet. He will lead us into the millennium. And he's going to be made young again, because he was 92 years old. But he kept telling us, you know, one day he's going to come and he's going to be renewed. That was the word they used. And you may not even recognize him because he's going to look young again.
Wow. So
he dies, and
yeah,
we're left with the question, you know, this is supposed to be the last prophet. What's happening here? So we didn't automatically think that Father was a prophet at first. That took a couple of months in my mind to register.
I think for everybody it did. It was just a real adjustment for everyone.
So how did he explain that then?
He had others stand up and tell us he was a prophet. He never did at first that I can remember.
So it wasn't self-proclaimed. And I think, Rachel, last time you were here, you said that people were pretty accepting of
they
of
were,
this,
because
correct?
he was the first counselor to grandfathers, and it was kind of like next in authority. So yeah,
And
we'll
he
just
had
follow
been
him.
he had been leading everything in the church by that point. His father was the figurehead,
Incapacitated.
but he wasn't deciding everything. Father got up and gave the last training at meeting and told everyone what to do. He took appointments with all the men in the church, and whoever else felt like they had a problem could come to him above anybody else.
Okay.
They couldn't access his father without him after his father had a stroke in 98.
Ah, okay.
So that was around 4 years that he was the de facto head.
So people were already kind of accepting him as the person that you would look to.
And he was a really good teacher. Like, he can explain the doctrines and everything really well. So it was a natural thing. And a lot of people said, well, nobody can teach like him, so he must be the next one.
Okay, so how did life change then? Once your dad became the prophet, how did life change for you guys?
Because now we're the prophet's kids.
Yeah, now it's like royalty, right?
It
Yeah.
was. I mean, and Warren always kept us so separate, like made us seem specialer than everyone else. So everyone more kind of was in awe, looked up to us.
Yeah, we were looked up to, and he wanted us to behave better, which wasn't always possible, but we tried.
Did
You
you
have to
feel
be
a
an
lot,
example.
Did you feel a lot of pressure?
Yeah, to be
Yeah.
an example and to not do things that wouldn't reflect bad on him.
Sure.
And
And he was so strict anyway. I mean, you really couldn't do bad, and really, it was almost impossible.
You couldn't even think bad, right?
No.
you're not supposed to.
Well, of course we thought bad. But, especially for the younger ones, he was so controlling. Like, they always had someone on them guiding every step of the way versus even we had a little more freedom, but it was just very controlled.
Yes, as a little child, I didn't have a mother on me all the time or as control of an environment. But as I got older, it became more that way until I was around 12.
Do you think it was more strict for the boys? Because there seems to be a different dynamic with the girls versus the boys in the community.
Yes, but by the time I was 12, then in his own family, then it was really strict for both boys and girls. They had certain mothers on them all the time, supposed to be with them day and check on them through the night.
Oh, wow.
But there was a different dynamic in the family because Warren favored the girls over the boys. Like, he would have fun girls' nights, but then strict boys' nights,
Yeah,
It's kind of like that way.
Yeah, because you would say that he would take you guys out to do hikes.
Dinner and, well, he would hike with all of us, but like he'd take us to dinner at least once a week, but never the boys.
But he liked to have the girls have their friends come over, but when we wanted it, he did not like us to do
Wasn't
that.
happening.
Do you think that was because of how your father was as far as with little girls? Do you
Yeah,
think
I
that that's
do.
why he welcomed the little girls over?
That's how
Oh,
he got to know
absolutely.
the girls that
'Cause
he
he
ended
married a
up
lot of
marrying
them.
them.
So there was he had motives behind that.
Yeah, it appears so.
Yeah. You find out after the fact. Yeah, that's...
Before we just skip ahead here a little bit, do you ever recall at a young age having questions? Did you ever wonder whether or not your father was credible with the things that he was trying to instill in you and those across the church?
I didn't. I thought he was a really good man. I really did. And I didn't see things that would make me think different as a child.
Because he taught so against what he was doing, I don't think, like for Ammon, he didn't really even see a reason to question him.
I didn't see anything my sister saw. He sat there and told us boys, you should rather die than ever harm a girl. You should rather die protecting your sister's virtue. And of course, I didn't think he was turning around and molesting them.
Right.
But in his mind, he wasn't stealing your virtue, right? That was like how he...
Well, some days he would tell me he was doing wrong. So he obviously did exactly opposite than he was teaching. He'd get up and say the exact opposite to these guys or to everyone, and then behind closed doors do the things he was doing.
Right.
But he wanted you guys to do differently.
Oh, it'd be perfect. And
Yeah.
perfect morals would be his term.
So what was life like as far as like the workload and everything goes? Because I remember reading in your book that school became almost secondary. Was that once you went to the ranch?
Once
or
I
was
went to
that...
the ranch.
Okay, so that's... I don't want to skip
Before we
ahead
went to
too
the
much.
ranch, then school was more of a priority.
Okay.
In Short Creek, they pretty much phased out high school, which was really interesting because in Salt Lake, it was a big deal. The high school, there's almost a high school pride in Alta Academy, and it was really fun to see our older siblings and the older kids there
Yeah.
because they did really well in their education. They were quite successful, quite high grades, high
Right.
GPAs.
So a lot of the girls started getting married at that high school age, even would it be even
In
middle
Short
school
Creek,
age? Yeah.
especially. After his father had a stroke, then that's when the marriage age went way down. Didn't seem to be as big of a thing in the early 90s.
Because your grandfather, he didn't marry real young, right?
Yeah, right. That's when Warren started taking over. That's when the girls were getting younger and younger. And it really actually originated up here in Canada. Up
Yeah.
in Canada, I mean. They started marrying young first, and then it just kind of, with Winston Blackmore, and then it went lower and lower down in the Short Creek area.
Just became more like acceptable, like, well, he's getting away with it. So what did you think of classmates and friends marrying your father and then
that
becoming...
happened at the ranch. And
Oh,
after
okay.
he started that Lands of Refuge thing, he kept it secret from most of the people that he was marrying that young.
So let's talk about your transition to the Texas property there. What did that look like for you? What was the explanation as to why it is that you were being relocated?
Family members started to just disappear from Short Creek. And there was some ladies he'd married underage and had children. And he felt like the law was after him. So they were the first ones that disappeared.
Oh, okay.
And some younger people, younger girls he had married. So we didn't know exactly what he was doing, if he just had a place somewhere that he was hiding him at. But he started being gone all the time. So, of course, we wondered what was going on, but you don't ask questions. He'd, shut off. Don't even question what I'm doing. I'm doing the Lord's work. So we didn't know what was going on, just that there must be another place. And then he came in November and gathered up all of his young children and took them away. And that's when we heard that there is a place called Zion. And that's all we knew, is there's this place called Zion where he was going to redeem Zion. And only the people the Lord told him could go there would be allowed. So when he took the children away from their mothers, including my mother, that's what we were told he was doing, was taking them to Zion.
How old were you?
I was 13. And I was told I couldn't go because it wouldn't be Zion anymore if I went there.
Wow.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that was the explanation you were provided?
Probably because I was too full of lies.
He was. He was like more. He was a strong thinker. He was the kind to kind of be a leader, and so I think it was just a threat a little bit.
So just a lack of
And
submissive.
I like sports and playing and rollerblading and basketball and that kind of stuff, and that wasn't even going to be there.
So you didn't fall in line.
Right. Yes.
Because
Interesting.
over there wasn't toys and playing and all that. It was way
No.
more strict.
Right.
It was work.
Yeah.
And he hinted to us that he left behind that it would be a lot of work to go there, but to be there was now the most special thing. If you were part of the FLDS, you were more special if you could go to Zion, and everybody in Short Creek would revere you if you went to Zion. So
Right, and it was kind of like
a
they used-
status.
Yeah, they use secrecy to entice you, right?
Yes.
Like, oh, you don't. If you want to know this secret, then you got to be this certain way.
Right.
So
You
you're
got to
trying to
live
earn
more
it.
righteous so you can go there.
So both of you guys were left behind, as well as your mother.
Yes.
Yes.
How did she feel? Did she willingly let her young children go, or did she try to fight
No.
that?
No,
She had
did.
breast cancer, and she had told some other ladies in the family when their children, I think a couple children almost went, and she heard about it. I didn't know about it. And she told those other mothers, I could never let that happen with my children. So when it came down to it, Father gathered her up and said, the Lord's telling me to take your children away to this Zion place, because if I don't, they'll be destroyed by the wicked, but you can't come. And she said, Warren, you can't.
She was the only wife that stood up and kind of fought him on it. She was the
Yes.
only wife that actually was like, you can't do this to me.
She said, I may die and never see him again.
Yeah.
And he said, well, if it's pretty much your children's life will be destroyed if they stay. You're choosing to let them be destroyed if you try keeping them here.
And so all of this came after, sorry to interrupt you, all of this came after her breast cancer diagnosis?
Yes, and she
Wow.
had been going through chemo for a
Right.
while. She'd gone through chemo.
She was really sick all the
And
time.
then she got into natural cures and didn't want to touch chemo again. And at the same time, he told her, the Lord showed me you didn't pass the test. you have to take chemo again.
But in the very first place, when she knew she had breast cancer for years, he wouldn't let her go get it looked at.
Do you think he
Because
knew
she-
she had it?
She knew. She kept asking if she could go to the doctor, and he wouldn't let her go to the doctor until it was way too bad.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. He just wouldn't let her. And I think more than anything, it shows the control. Like, she didn't have a choice to go until he said.
Yeah.
In her mind, for sure.
But there is one place where you find his reason in his dictations that he wrote later after she died. He was writing about some of his other ladies that he claimed were struggling, and he was saying he's praying for them to get sick or die so they won't commit sin. And he said, I saw that Barbara wouldn't pass the tests that were coming, so I asked the Lord to take her, and was amazed at how fast it happened. So he wanted her to die
Yeah.
because he felt like she'd be a hinderment to what he was trying to do.
So do
And
you
she
think
would have.
that-
I believe she would have stood up against a lot of that underage stuff that started happening after she died.
Wow.
And he probably saw that when she approached him after you came to her, and then she went into his room. He was probably like, "This woman's going to challenge me."
Yeah, well, and she was the kind to challenge him, and I never saw other mothers challenge him like she did. She did of any of his wives, she would challenge him.
So then you guys inherited that really strong will, and so
I
that's
think
probably
so.
what
I
he
think
saw
she,
in you
made,
guys.
she did put a strength into her kids. I believe
Yeah, I do too.
So do you blame your father for your mother's death then?
I do.
a lot. Yeah, I think he made it.
I think he made it happen faster.
Much faster.
And
I think it could have been fixed too. I really
that
do.
second chemo came when her immune system was really low. And I was with her when she got it the second time, and she was so sick and in so much pain constantly. And at the same time, she wanted to talk to her younger children so bad and know how they were doing, and she had no contact with them. She didn't even know where they were.
So he took her happiness. He took her will to live.
She
really.
was so heartbroken.
Well,
over
that's
it.
what I feel like. Just watching her after he took her kids, then she got sicker and sicker so much faster.
Oh yeah.
And we both were the only children that got to watch her
Yes.
fight for her life fail that fast.
How many siblings were there? Full-blooded
8.
siblings?
8.
8 of you? Okay.
But you guys, you two, and there was an older sister, correct? That or no?
I'm the oldest.
You're the
You're the
oldest.
oldest.
I'm her
Okay.
oldest.
There was one girl below you. Mm-hmm. Was she also kind of cast out, or
No, she was at the creek for a while. She was with us for a while, but she got to go before
Okay.
us. Well, I guess she was around
She
most of that
wasn't
whole
there,
time.
but she got a word they used was trained. She was trained for,
Yeah, she got to
Zion,
be more special.
but she didn't get called to go there yet.
Oh,
But she knew all about
She
it.
also was newly enough married. She just wasn't involved with Mother as much as me and Ammon were.
Right.
So when did you finally get to go to Zion?
Mother
She got to go
went
first.
in June, around the 1st of June, 2004, when she was on oxygen and everything at this point because
She's pretty much.
she got pneumonia too, on top of her cancer. And she went down there with her youngest child. I think Amber came to Short Creek for a little while with her.
Yeah.
Anyway, Rachel calls me because I'm working with Jim Allred's sons and tells me that Mother Knit called and said that Mother was really sick and we needed to hurry and be good enough to come there. And then it was the same day that Uncle Isaac called and had me come real quick to the property so that we could be taken down to Texas. But we were told we were going just to see Mother. We didn't actually get to go be in Zion.
Yeah, we literally got told, you're not good enough to go to Zion, to the land, but you get to come see your mother.
But that was your first peek at Zion.
Well, the first peak,
We came to the
we didn't even get to
hospital.
go to the
Oh, we
land.
didn't even get to
she
go.
was
Came
in
to
the hospital.
and saw her.
Okay.
And she wanted to get out of the hospital. She knew she was going to die. So she wanted to come out bad enough that they made her sign papers that pretty much said your death's not on us. And she did, and we had a hotel room for her to come to. And she tried to get up and walk into the hotel room and went unconscious when she tried to do that. And she almost died right there
Yeah.
in front of us at the hotel. So when she came back to, she just said, get me back home right now.
Because she wanted to be around all her children.
Right.
but we didn't get to go. So she was trying to spend time with us, but then it was like she was going to die and she wanted to be around her little children too. And so they just took her back to the Texas land.
Yes. And then the next morning, they
got a hotel room for me and Ammon, and we couldn't sleep all night. It was like, we were laying there and I'd be like, Ammon, are you still awake? And he'd say, yes. And then all night, Rachel, are you still awake? Yes. Because they just got one room for us.
Yeah. I slept on the couch. She slept on the bed.
I was pregnant, 7 months pregnant.
Oh my god.
It was quite the time.
Yeah.
And then the next morning, we left at 6 to head back to Short Creek. And we knew Mother was going to die any minute. They're going to call and tell us she was dead.
We cried. We cried a lot. I cried a lot.
It was really hard. And we drove like 9 hours to Albuquerque, New Mexico. I think it was 9, maybe 8. And then Father called and said, the Lord told me you can come to Zion now.
And he was in Albuquerque. That's why we had to go
he was
there.
in Albuquerque.
So what happened then? Did you turn around and head back?
They got these discs.
All
that
these
had his
trainings for us to
on it.
get trained to be
So-
worthy to go on the land.
Yeah, we had to listen to the training. And you had to make this covenant before you turned the training on that you promised you would believe everything that was said.
That's the covenant. You have to believe everything that's
Before
being said.
But you have to covenant, and you have to promise to believe, and then you have to promise to do
Yes.
after.
Wow.
Wow.
So we listened to that for hours while we were driving back.
I know, it was so long.
And you were so pregnant. Like
I know, and we were driving along, and we are getting told about this temple and all this stuff in this training. So I'm imagining we're going to this beautiful land with this beautiful temple. And then we get there, and it was...
A desert with cactus and mesquite bushes.
oh wow.
But there was a lot of development that had actually happened on the property, or not
Not
at that
yet.
point.
It was just beginning.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
they had put 3 houses up, and they were putting up a huge house for my father and his family, and a meeting house and a storehouse. The temple foundation was just starting to get dug, but the land is pretty wild still.
Okay.
Not a lot of roads
Okay.
or anything.
I was
Maybe-
surprised how not beautiful it was.
You're like, this is not what I pictured.
A lot of hype going into it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that would be disappointing after all that time and all those discs. Wait a minute, this is it. So what was life like once you got there? You were married, and
Well, we just were going there basically to see Mother. We got to go, and she was still alive but unconscious. So we just went into the room that
We got there
she was dying.
around midnight, and she was already breathing her last, pretty much.
They told
they had her
us-
on life support, or at least a breathing. I don't know what. to
Just
call it.
oxygen.
Just had her on oxygen, but they had the bag breathing for her,
Yeah.
so she had the mask on her face and everything.
Yeah, they told us though that she kept saying, "Where's Rachel and Ammon? Where's Rachel and Ammon?" You know, Claire, until they told her Rachel and Ammon are on their way here. Then she went to sleep. She
And-
didn't wake up after that.
And she's like, I need to help Ammon do his math. I need to help Ammon do his math. Some of her last words.
oh wow, just thinking of that sounds like something that would go through a mother's brain. Like I got to make sure they're okay.
Yeah. So, oh gosh, tough.
So sorry.
And so
that-
she died at something like 5:30 the next morning. We
Yeah.
stayed up all night with her.
I'll tell you, the thing of watching her transition, go through all that pain, and then when I walked in right out, because they had changed her clothes, and that's when she died, when they took her off the oxygen to change her clothes, and to walk in and see her, she suddenly looked normal, and she literally had a smile on her face, and it was like, it was almost relieving to just see that she was happy and out of all that pain, and it made it feel a little better. It made it a little bit easier.
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, it sure felt peaceful around her body after she died.
'Cause
I
she
don't know,
was
it's just
finally
like
released from
she
all of it.
she hadn't smiled all that time, and now she was. I don't know. It was just interesting to see that. I think. I know it was. I mean, better after all that she'd been through.
Yeah, yeah, truly released of all of it, not just the cancer, but all of it.
And she literally died of pneumonia
Wow.
because her immune system was so low.
Yeah.
Her lungs just filled up with fluid where she couldn't breathe.
So now you guys are at the ranch, and this is obviously a very hard time for you and all of your siblings.
And that's where our life split pretty much.
Yeah, so Rachel
I
goes
got
up
sent
to
up to South
R23
Dakota.
in South
And, you
Dakota.
know, Warren pretty much was keeping me separate because, you know, obviously I told my husband what I'd done. So he's like, we got to keep her away from the family. So at that point, I had very little to do with these siblings. I'd visit or I'd go for a few months, but it wasn't for really long periods of time.
Yeah.
So Ammon can tell you how it really was there.
Yeah, so if you came to Zion, the first thing you have to do is listen to every training Father had given on the land. And I should interject here. We call him Father and not Dad because he was never our dad.
Yeah.
And we never call him Dad. He's way more of an authority figure than a dad. Didn't have a dad relation.
What did you call? How did you address him when you were growing up?
Father.
Father, always.
Never, ever said anything else but Father.
Okay.
Well, once I called him Warren.
How'd that go?
How'd that go
Her
over?
mother called him that. And mother's like, don't you dare call him Warren.
Oh, not to his face then. Yeah.
Anyway, so we listened to the trainings, and I listened to them like till about midnight every night. And it took me 2 days to go through it from 6 a.m. to midnight. So that would be about 36 hours of training. Can't promise I stayed awake the whole time.
Yeah.
But I got done, and I was 14, and I was put on the work crew immediately. I found out really fast that I wasn't supposed to come home and eat with my family or really have anything to do with them. We just got up 5 in the morning. First, we had a prayer time with all the workers at 6, breakfast, and then to work. And you worked all day till 2 the next morning. That was the schedule when I got there. So that's about 4 hours of sleep. Three
unreal.
hours of sleep to 5 because you're supposed to be up at 5. Men's prayer at 6. We had a men's prayer at noon and a men's prayer at 8 p.m. After we got the big house done, which was the deadline we were trying to meet, and we made it by like 30 seconds. Then he changed the prayer time to 5 a.m. And that's what it stayed at for the rest of the time we lived there was 5 a.m.
And you were working until
So
Into the
when
morning.
it went to 5 a.m., we worked till 1. Unless you had a heavy deadline, then you just worked all night. But if you worked all night, you didn't go to bed in the morning. You worked all night and then all the next day till midnight, and then you could go to bed. Be up by 5 in the morning. So you didn't do an all-nighter unless you were planning on going at least 36 hours.
Was everyone on the work crew young? Is that how you guys were able to sustain this, or?
No, but most of the men were in their 20s. Not very many men were over 30 years old that I can remember at the time. There were a few, but the more young men, a lot of the old men were left in Short Creek.
So what happened if you didn't meet a deadline, or like how did they control all of these people? Was it fear-based? Did something happen where you banished?
Yeah, he started, I mean, at first he would just get really after everybody, but then he started every time they missed a deadline, someone got sent away.
But it was like, if you meet this deadline, the Lord has great blessings offered for you. But he never told you what they were. And if you miss a deadline, then it was like, I was going to bring you into the presence of God, but you didn't meet it and you weren't being fervent enough. So you missed it. And I had to atone for you. I had to go through great suffering. The Lord is just about to wipe you off the face of the earth. He was going to send a scourge, or he was going to send a storm to destroy
And it was
you.
funny, like
Oh, wow.
a big storm would come and he'd say, that was me, and I was intervening so you wouldn't be killed. I mean,
Yeah.
just, Texas has some crazy
Yeah.
storms. Obviously, they can have tornadoes or whatever.
Yeah,
so
those
it's
super
just,
shells would come through, and then we'd find out after it was over that we
He
were
prayed-
just about destroyed.
Yeah.
We had to atone for us.
So what did atonement look like? I mean, it sounds like he's speaking like he's Christ himself.
yeah.
Yeah, it was.
I think he was definitely slowly putting himself in that position, which I very much believe he thinks he is now.
Yeah.
Yeah, he claimed he atoned like Jesus. It just wasn't quite as much as Jesus. And he claimed that men like him, the prophets, had to atone
For the
along
people.
with Jesus for the people.
So he was carrying all of your sin and
Yes,
suffering
he would
on
tell
himself.
us that.
So
Yes,
you were
you're-
hurting him if you
you're
didn't.
bought with the price. Yeah, you're hurting the prophet. You're causing him pain if you don't live as he taught, or you're causing him pain if you don't meet the time schedule.
So did you feel like you just lived with a constant sense of guilt?
Yeah.
Knowing
kinda.
that?
Well, we grew up that way.
We grew up that way.
That was
He
just the norm.
never made us feel like we were good, ever.
Because he could teach something good, but then there's always something put into every teaching that it's going to be so hard to be this good and be good enough for God to be happy with you.
What was that saying that you guys had? Like, your best is, it was something,
On the temple,
yeah.
doing our very best is barely good enough for God.
Wow.
Yeah.
So opposite of what you see in schools and churches.
Yeah.
It's always try your best.
Well, and I think really Warren lived a lie, obviously. He was doing so much bad behind. I mean, even while these people are dying to get these buildings done, he's having sex orgies and doing all this stuff with these young girls the whole time, supposedly atoning, but really he's doing all this terrible stuff. And they have no idea that that's what's going on. But our whole life, I think, for his kids especially, it was like he made us be what he wished he was. He made us be so perfect, but he was just a terrible person.
Do you think that he struggled with his own demons, or do you think that he didn't carry that much?
I think he did.
Yeah,
And a
I
lot
think
of when
he still
he
does.
said he was atoning because he did have, like, I think some type of guilt that was driving him crazy clear back then. I very much think it was his guilt was hurting him.
Right.
That's really interesting. So how many wives did he end up taking at the ranch, and what did you think about that when you saw them being really young?
Yeah, when I first went there, then I found out that he had married 3 of my classmates.
And
When we
he's
were
14.
13, but they were 13.
Yeah.
They had been married before they turned 14. They had gone to school with me in Short Creek, and then I come there and they're, my mother.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
But we had
Did you
to
have
say
to call
mother.
him mother?
Oh, yes.
Oh, wow.
Everybody married to him, you had to call mother.
What were those interactions like?
So he called me and Levi aside shortly after he brought these young girls there,
And these were like the 2 oldest boys, kind of, because Mosiah was a little autistic.
and he wasn't
so
there
He wasn't
either.
there.
He brought his young wives there, and they had been in our grades, in our classes in school, and introduced us to him, and then he pulled us aside into his office and said, "You boys are going to be tempted towards my young wives, and you must leave them alone and be far away from them in your thoughts and desires and feelings." And, he's projecting on us, but we didn't want them because once they were married to him, I didn't want my father's wives.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was really different to see the people I grew up with married to him and have to call them mother.
Yeah.
I think
And over
that's very
time,
hard.
then it got to where there was not girls on the ranch over 13 years old that weren't married. So
how does-
us younger
yeah.
people are like,
Yeah.
how young is he going to try to marry me? Or how young of a wife is he going to try to give me when I'm old enough? Because I knew I wouldn't get a wife until I was at least 18. But all the young girls were getting married. So,
Where does that leave you?
they're going to be way younger than me. And I didn't want that because I always wanted to marry somebody closer to my age. I just knew we'd be able to understand each other better.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
That's scary. That'd be scary as a guy.
Yeah.
I know you weren't supposed to have crushes. I asked Rachel the same question, but was there like a certain girl that you were hoping you'd be able to marry, or did you not even get your hopes up?
Of course. Especially as I got old enough to be married, and he was in prison, then there were girls that were my age there. And, you're not supposed to think about each other, but
But you naturally
you
do.
do.
It's supposed to
Yeah.
be that way.
it's natural.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're really careful and formal because if anybody sees anything, you'll be reported on. But there were secret crushes, definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
I think everyone had them.
So even before, when there were still weddings happening, did it ever just break your heart to have a girl get married that you maybe wanted to marry? Or?
I didn't set my sights on anybody at that point because I didn't want that to happen.
Right. That makes sense.
And Warren obviously was marrying all his classmates,
Yeah,
so
the
we
people
better
I
not
knew were
think
getting
about
married.
it.
Yeah. So they weren't even an option.
But he told me that all his brothers had wanted to take his father's wives, and that's why they were all sent away.
But really,
Father's
he took them all.
brothers.
He sent his own brothers away?
Yes.
But he took all the wives.
So he took them to
But
protect them.
that's just
Yes.
him, accuse everyone else of exactly what he's just a weird guy.
Yes.
He's not our dad. He's not our father, Ammon.
I know. But how else am I
He's a
supposed to
freak.
refer to him?
I know.
I'm just kidding.
It was
He's a
funny.
pretend. He's not real. I mean, no, I totally see what you're
it's-
saying, but
it's
I'm
a
just saying,
detached father.
yes.
It's a title.
And
not
it
a-
is. No, that's what we're obviously taught. I'm just saying he just hurt so many people. It's hard to even. It's hard to even reconcile with it all. It's just so much.
Yeah, the wake of destruction that he's left behind is awful. But it's so good to see the both of you here being able to smile and joke with one another, given all of everything it is that you've had to endure. Seriously, it is.
Yeah, it is. And it's stuff that just no one had any knowledge of, we actually lived in Las Vegas in 2006
Oh,
when
really?
Warren was arrested. And I remember that coming on as breaking news. And we're like, oh, wow, that's just right down the street. So did you guys know he was on the run, or did you know the charges against him or the claims against
So
him?
when we were building the temple, he was there quite a bit. He would just come walk through the temple at night, every few nights, but he never was in there helping. But he was making sure we were building it how he wanted us to. So he'd come through, and you didn't always see him, but maybe once a week or whatever, I'd see him walking through and making sure we were doing everything right. And he had a deadline of June 12th, 2005. It was supposed to be complete. We started it on January 1st. So
Of 2005.
January 1st of 2005, and we were supposed to be done by June 12th. That's less than 6 months.
No
That's
pressure.
5.5 months.
And what was the square footage of it?
It's 90 feet by 180 feet, and it's got a basement plus 3 floors.
It's mighty
And
ambitious.
it's a massive, it's 80 feet tall out of the ground.
Wow.
That explains the long work days.
The outside's got a limestone veneer on it.
Oh my God.
Every block is
And all
2
the,
feet by 2 feet by 2 inches thick. Besides on the basement, it's 4 inches thick. So
and they
we
had to cut all the stone.
We had to get it out of the ground, take it to a stone cutting yard, and then cut it to finish size.
Oh my
So they
gosh.
could put it up. And I did stone cutting when I was 14 and 15 years old for about 6 months that year.
And
I was one of the main stone cutters.
You barely got it done in time.
Yeah, we got it done by the end of the year. We did
They
not
didn't
meet the
meet the
June.
Oh, okay. You didn't meet the
So-
initial deadline.
No, they were way too tight.
That's beyond
They were
ambitious.
impossible. We had about 75 men. That includes cabinet builders, furniture builders, stone cutters, and the people actually working on the building. So we're spread very thin, trying to meet his time schedule. And it was falling behind really bad. So we put all of us on the inside. And I worked inside putting hanging sheetrock and doing flooring. Those are my main 2 things I did in there. And it wasn't just 18-hour days. It was 36-hour days, 48-hour days.
That's crazy.
And I'm telling you, the work they did was meticulous. It was perfect. They did perfect work.
Well, don't look around too closely.
Yeah.
Because we built
In our
this.
OSB box here.
Well, because if it wasn't perfect, Warren would make him do it over.
Right.
Oh,
And we did. We aimed to do it perfect. And it was, to us, it was neat to build a temple because we thought we'd be getting blessings in there that would bring us closer to God. We had no idea what his purposes were.
Right.
Did you take a tremendous sense of pride in what it is that you had managed to accomplish? Because I know there have been accounts of people that just lived in the area that didn't belong to the church who said they were very impressed with the property and the
No,
the
it was
multi-development
impressive.
I was
It
very,
was
very
impressive.
proud of our
I was
work
impressed
on
watching
the
them.
temple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how fast it got done because it's an immense project.
Yeah.
And an immense amount of labor went into that building.
And was that the general consensus amongst everyone that, hey,
Yes.
look at what we have done? Or was it, did it come? Because it sounds like you were doing this, at least to a certain extent, against your will, especially with the length of hours that you were having to devote to.
I
getting
felt
all
like
this.
I would never know what it was like to not be tired. That was the one thing.
Yeah.
I think with it all, they're meeting, they're either not meeting these schedules or not, but every time. So there's the sense of pride that they're accomplishing this, but at the same time, the fear, because every time they don't meet a deadline, someone's going to get sent away.
Yeah.
Someone's going to get punished. And so am I going to be the next one? It was always that fear of, am I going to be the next one sent away because we didn't meet this deadline? So it was
Yeah.
this pride mixed with fear and tired and sadness. And I think for some people, it definitely probably just about drove them crazy.
And at the same time, you are being told, if you get it done, you're going to get your blessings. You're going to see God. So you're aiming for that at the same time. And the sooner you get done, the sooner that happens. And these great blessings will be poured out upon you, like things you can't imagine. That's what we're told. And we finally got done by the end of the year. And I went back to the stone cutting yard and helped finish the stone. I think the stone was by far the most work.
Yeah. Can't
It's
imagine.
just some hard stuff.
Yeah.
And it broke easy, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to
Because
cut it with
limestone breaks.
Very fragile.
very fragile.
Wow.
And it was from 4 layers down in the ground. So we didn't just go cut the top layer of rock out. We had to cut down the first, second, and third layers and throw them up in a pile of rocks. And then the 4th layer was good enough for the temple. And it was a whiter rock. than the other
Yeah.
layers. So it was a very difficult process.
Yeah. I can't even imagine that. That's crazy. So you get the temple done. How long is it from the time that the temple's done till Warren's arrested?
Almost 7 months and almost 8 months. But we got the temple done, and I guess we weren't worthy to go inside.
Oh. So you were inside building it, but then after it was done, you couldn't go inside?
Yeah, you couldn't go inside. And nobody was worthy to get their ordinances, is what he said. So the temple sat there without anything getting done in it
Huh.
until he went to prison.
You
He
guys-
went to go in it, obviously.
He would go in it,
and
but
his
he-
special wives.
The last time he was there, I believe it was 2 weeks before he got taken to prison. He was there and he held these little meetings with all the different families. He wouldn't go to the meeting house anymore because he was on the run.
Oh.
But he'd call all the families one at a time or a few at a time to his house and talk to them and told them. And he came back, he was going to bring everyone into the temple that was worthy. So that was his plan when he returned.
So you guys knew he was on the run then?
In 05, after we missed the deadline, he told us that Utah and Arizona had put out arrest warrants for him, and the Lord told him to not be taken. So he was going to go into hiding so he wouldn't be taken, and he left the land, and he made it sound like he wouldn't come back. But he came back off and on every few months, very great secrecy.
Yeah, and he
And-
wouldn't tell us why he was wanted. He
No.
didn't tell us
We
what
didn't
he
know
was
what-
wanted
We
for.
didn't know what was
You didn't know
going
what he had
on.
done. You just thought he was being persecuted?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
And-
I kind of knew he was bad.
Yeah,
but-
Rachel knows more than me.
But yeah, these guys just really just believed, it's like way back in Joseph Smith's day when he got killed, right? We just thought
Yes, same
he's just
thing.
being persecuted like that.
It's proof that the devil's angry at us doing this work of Zion, so he's trying to take out the
Yeah, that's
prophet,
what we
was the
believed.
mentality.
Okay. So how did you feel when you heard that your father had been arrested?
It was shocking. And for some reason, we thought, well, if he's the prophet, then God's going to make so he can come out of prison. So this isn't going to last very long, was my initial thought as a
Yeah.
16-year-old.
But then you started getting calls from prison from him, correct? Or
He immediately started calling daily and giving trainings, and that's what his phone calls were. He called and gave a training every day or several times a day.
did he put a stop to all the weddings and births and all of that immediately, or that came later?
Weddings only could happen if he was there or performing them.
Yeah, and that's how it always was like the key. Who the prophet was the one that had to perform the marriage. So pretty much when he was in prison, it's like, oh yeah, no more marriages.
That wasn't even a question.
Yeah,
And he talked about it and said, he'd write to us boys and tell us the young people are being greatly tested to see if they'll wait on the Lord for their marriages, and many are failing and leaving for a mess of pottage.
Did
really,
people
there
start
were-
to leave?
Yes, as the years started to go on, the young people, especially that were older than me, saw that their life was just going away, so they got married. And then us kids that stayed were always told, you guys are so strong, you're waiting for the prophet, you're going to get blessings so much greater than those people that left. So
So
you
did they-
just got to be strong and wait for the prophet. It's so worth it. That's our constant.
did the girl that you had a
Yeah.
crush on leave?
I think the girls that I have had a crush on are still in.
Well, you got a better wife.
Yeah.
I'm very happy with my wife.
That's
I just had to
amazing.
ask you that because I haven't. Yeah.
Now we all know. So take me to the day of the raid. So you worked a little bit on the security. Was it a security force or was it just shifts you guys took?
Shifts. So anybody was good. I mean, it wasn't a special organization.
Okay.
It was set up to make sure people didn't intrude on the land. He was obviously paranoid people would try to come on and see what was going on. So we had a tower, and he would designate a place as a sacred site. If he designated a sacred site, you had to have somebody watch it to make sure nobody went on it. Even if they lived on the land, they had to have a special blessing to be able to go on the sacred site.
Okay.
So
Can you give an example of what a
he
sacred site would be?
called the blessing being set apart as a temple builder. The temple quarry was a sacred site. The saw yard was a sacred site. The temple lot was a sacred site. Originally, those are the main three.
Okay.
When we were working on the interior of the temple, anywhere that had product for the interior of the temple was considered a sacred site. When it was accomplished, that wasn't anymore. But to work inside the temple, you also had to have 2 more ordinances that he gave you. And one was called sealing the love of God in your heart and mind. And the third one was being set apart as a temple worker. So temple builder, sealing the love of God, temple worker. So there are these layers of status
Yeah, the hierarchy.
that you have to be a better person to get this one, and then even a better person to get that one.
So there's
That
always something to
ordinance.
strive for.
There's always a hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
The whole time, I was always much wickeder than I was at a certain point in time.
And it got to where if you were one of the men, if you were a male priesthood bearer there, and you didn't have that temple worker status, you got sent away.
Wow.
So you had to reach that, or you were
Yeah.
going to be sent away.
Were the men just sent away because they were pure competition?
I think a lot of it, or if they were questioning, or like you're hurt, you're doing this is too unreachable, or if like any of the men questioned him at all, or like even if the architect that was a real architect said, we can't build it this way because it's not going to work, structurally, and that would make him mad. Things like that would make him upset
Or-
because he thought he knew most.
Oh.
Or just have a dream that somebody was bad. That was enough to
Yeah.
send them away too.
Wow.
Or he'd say he had a dream because
What happened was there ever an instance where a father or a mother was like, no, you can't have my 13-year-old daughter?
Not that I know
not
of.
that I know
They
of.
all just,
I don't know of it.
But that would have been the end of their...
I know
Would have taken
the
him
one.
anyway,
They
Yes,
lost
I
their
actually do.
family.
Up in Canada, when Warren told him that his 12-year-old daughter belonged to him, he said no. He said no. That you can have her when she's 18. You cannot have her when she's 12. There's no reason for you to have her when she's 12. But then he kept telling him, the Lord showed me she's gonna die if she stays in your home. She's gonna be killed. She's gonna be hurt. He just keeps saying all this stuff. So finally, after so much pressure and telling him he was going to be destroyed and lose his family and stuff, then it was like, or whatever. I just know he gave him lots of threats. I can't say exactly. I just know he threatened him kind of and told him that his daughter would be destroyed. Then he finally gave in, but he said that she could not have a marital relationship with him till she was 18.
And that was when she was 12 years old. While we were building the temple, I remember when her and her daughter, who is her niece, showed up, and we were told they were married to father.
And they're like,
And they're these
teensy
little girls.
Oh, no. Yeah, it was sad.
yeah. I mean, that's ultimately what took him down, right? Like the one little girl that they always blur her face in all the documentaries.
Well, there was several of them, but that one was
Like a little redhead
actually a
girl.
different one. That was
She was the
Jessup.
last one. He married shortly before he went to prison.
Yeah.
Well, that was like the final, like,
That was
nail
the
in
final,
in his coffin,
yes.
right? That's the one that you always see.
Yes, that is because she was the very youngest when he got taken.
Okay.
Because a couple of them had like turned 13 and 14.
14.
Wow, I didn't realize there were so many
There
that
were
young.
so
I thought there
many.
was only one or two.
No.
That
Oh, no, there were lots of them.
There was at least
Even
three
before I got
12-year-olds.
married, there was 15-year-olds married to him. And
Well-
I was 18.
And once he started those lands, that's when it really picked up, because he married 13-year-olds in 2000, end of 2003, and then 2004. And by 2005, he'd married 3 12-year-olds.
4, didn't he?
Who would the fourth be?
What happened to all these girls? Like, where are they now?
Several are still in there,
Yeah, and only two left.
faithful to him.
Most of them. Most of those underage ones are still think that
Still
they
there
love
waiting
him.
for him. Wow. So that's kind of. I mean, so they'll never actually have a real husband or have children or anything. That's their life. They're just waiting.
Until it changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think it will?
I think sometime it will.
I think
This
eventually
kinda
they'll
stuff
see maybe when Warren
can't
dies.
last
But,
forever.
Right.
but it's been way slower than I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
I'm shocked how long people have held on.
So when was the last time a baby was born in the community? I mean, they know if they're breaking the law now because if a baby's born, it's like,
He banned marital relations starting in 2010, and the full church was by the 1st of 2012. So that's how long it's been.
and there hasn't
Except
been
for-
any where it's like, oops.
Just a couple.
There has been.
There's been a couple people that did it
Imagine
after
that.
several years,
Yeah.
but for the most part, no. It's a
Most
huge.
everybody's pretty obedient.
It's a huge issue in the community where husbands and wives can't hug or do anything but have a brief handshake.
Husbands and wives have to shake hands?
Yes, and it's
Oh, wow.
so sad because it looks like all those relationships just went cold, and the love is almost
They
gone.
really did. I know with
course.
even the relationship with my husband was like, feels like you're my brother now. I don't know. It
Yeah.
was just like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
this is weird. I'm not almost not even attracted to you now.
So there's it's almost a despondency all across the community and the married families where they don't even seem married because they can't even
Right.
give each other a hug.
The truth is, he took the love out of the whole church, out of the whole cult, I'll say, and so everyone almost doesn't know how to love anymore because they've become so detached. And a lot of that detachment comes to, well, is my family going to be sent away? I'm not going to let myself love them, so it won't hurt so much when we get separated.
That's true, because he did that a lot. You're sent away, then you're brought back. Then
In
you're
our
sent away.
family, at first, when people would get sent away or moved around, it was really hard. Everybody'd go out
And cry
and
and,
cry
be
and
sad.
give each other hugs and hope you come back, you know. And pretty soon it happened so much to where we were like, I can't set any sort of affection on anybody because it'll get ripped apart.
Yeah, I
And
was
it may
surprised.
be 5 years before I see that person again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember being surprised when I'd see them because it was a little different for me. But the coldness, like they wouldn't let themselves love each other because it might hurt.
Yeah, it hurts too much. It hurts too much.
Yeah. Oh man, that is so sad. I can't even to do that to an entire community. It's crazy that he's maintained so much control for so long from prison. You would have thought that would have fallen apart in a year.
I think it's a generation of being trained that he, not just him, but he trained a generation to be so loyal to the prophet that man speaks for God. And if you can just endure whatever test comes, the ultimate end will be so much happier. So they're putting their eternal salvation first because they think he has that power to say if they can go to heaven or not. So they're willing to go through whatever suffering in their minds they feel like they need to for God to let them have a happiness that they can never quite seem to get.
Yeah, and it just starts so young. It's not like you're converted to it. It's your only way of teaching it. You're indoctrinated. That's all you know.
And his recordings are what everyone has. His trainings have been spread among the people for many years. So if they want to listen to something religious, it's his voice they hear. It's not anybody else.
and there is no outside influence.
Right.
No
There is-
outside influence.
Yeah, so there's no.
Absolutely shut off.
Because I think it's really hard for people to understand that haven't grown up that way. They're like, wait, I don't, why do they stay? But if you don't have anything else that you know, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you hear that from when you're a baby. You're hearing his voice, his training, and what he claims is right. So you believe it because that's how children are.
And your parents and your grandparents.
They're
and
supposed to
the
love
people
you the
trust.
most.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So the day of the raid, this is really with Texas Raid, your book, this
Right.
is really what it focuses on is what happened when all of those trucks showed up and they were there to investigate. CPS shows up. How were you guys feeling? Did you think this is just a one-day thing? They're just going to ask some questions. Did you have any idea it was going to lead to what it led to?
No, when the raid started, we didn't even know what was happening. And that night when they came in, we were told that CPS was coming to interview some girls. We didn't know why. I'm sure some of the men saw the warrant and knew what it was about, but most of us didn't. So they came in at 9 p.m. And by the way, we were on mountain time over there for some
Yeah.
weird reason. So it
He's
was
making-
10 o'clock for all the officers and everyone.
Yeah.
But they came in and they brought most of the girls down there to be interviewed, and it went all night. So we're really curious what's such a big deal, what's going on. And maybe the state wants to be done by morning, so that's why they're going all night. I mean, why do you go all night interviewing children instead of letting them sleep and do it in the morning, you know?
Right.
So that made us boys really curious, and that's why we were peeking in the windows and just like, what is going on here? We got to know.
Yeah.
And by morning, it was pretty clear that something bad was happening to us. And Uncle Merrill, who was in charge of the place, said, this is a raid. And to us, a raid was something bad because 1953, then the government had come into Short Creek, raided them, taken the mothers and children away, taken the fathers to prison. And it had been a couple of years before they were able to gather back there.
Wow.
So we realized that might lead to this kind of a situation.
And the real harm with it, I know they could have gone about it better and there was good and bad that came of it, but the harm with it was these people were indoctrinated to believe that the government was against them. So the whole way they were going about it was just like, oh, this is confirming that we are doing what's right.
was
We were
fulfillment.
told this is
Right.
fulfillment of prophecy.
Yes.
In January of 07, Father called and said that sometime the government will come on the land and try to interview you. And pretty much predicted some sort of raid would happen. So when it started happening, everybody's like, oh my goodness, he foresaw. He prophesied, and now it's fulfilling. So he's the prophet.
Right.
Definitely the prophet. See, it's happening just like you said. And this is to see if we'll stay faithful to him. And then they took all of us away, which it was persecution in our eyes.
Yeah.
And we were very unaware of what the world was like. So
So-
it was really hard.
Originally, they let the moms. They kept you guys at was it the Civic Center? They kept all of you guys together at?
Yeah,
or?
they took the girls away without their mothers. Then they took everybody else away and brought the mothers too.
Oh, okay.
I think it was the resistance was enough to make them bring the mothers. And I can't say for them, but that's what I felt like at the time.
Yeah.
And a lot of us were taken away without any sort of investigation to see what the conditions in our homes was. It was just walk in, you're all coming. Let's
Did they take
Gather
all
up.
minors?
Yes. At first, they didn't take the boys that were over 12. But after the first 2 days, then they started taking all the boys. But I wanted to be with my mother's children, my full siblings. So I asked CPS, can I go with my siblings? I'm a minor still, and they allowed me to. So I wasn't with the other boys my age for the first several days.
No, they thought that you were some kind of a spy or something, right?
Yeah, they thought I infiltrated at one point, or more than once.
And they're like, why is this older boy following around this group of children? So for you in your mind, were you just there for your siblings? Were you just there to comfort them? Or were you also trying to kind of figure out what was going on?
I wanted to be there to protect my siblings because we're being just thrust into the outside world without a clue of what was going on. And I
Yeah.
wanted to be there to protect my siblings.
Well, and like mother still didn't have a mother. So, he felt like I'm the oldest one that could go and protect him.
Yeah. And you were still a minor, so they said, yes, you can go.
Yes.
Okay.
What do you remember feeling in that time?
It was just so intense and kind of scary because they were taking us away from the life we knew out into the world.
The fear of the unknown was
And-
big.
Yeah.
Just didn't know what they were trying to do to us. And we thought they were just trying to destroy our religion and our faith. That's what all of us felt like.
This is all
throughout the
based on
whole
what it
thing.
is you had been told.
Yes. And then to break us up from our parents was extremely traumatic.
Yeah.
How did they get the mothers to let go of their kids?
They didn't. So they took all of us older boys into one shelter at Fort Concho, separate from everybody else. They'd just be like, this is for the benefit of the shelters. We're going to get families reunited, but we need to do this right now. So we'd protest, but we couldn't really fight. And you have officers everywhere. So they gathered us boys into one shelter, and our shelter manager's telling us, CPS at their meeting says they're going to put everybody in the Coliseum in San Angelo and reunite all the families. And he'd tell us that every day after he went to their meetings. Then on the weekend, he went back to his house and wasn't there anymore. And when they came one morning and said, a CPS person came and read a message to us that said, we're going to gather everybody into one facility so families can be reunited and we can better take care of y'all. So we were really happy. We finally get to go back with our families. Lots of families were kind of separated from each other because of the way CPS had taken first the girls and then not the boys. So the boys are separated from their families. Mothers are separated from their older girls. And we all wanted to be back with our families.
Right.
So we're happy about this. And they get us on the bus and get us ready to leave. And then they stand up and say, we're taking you guys 6 or 7 hours away to a ranch up in Amarillo in the Panhandle. So we were so shocked and stunned when they told us that.
We're taking a quick second away from this episode of the podcast to talk to you about the sponsor of today's episode, and that is Delete Me. We've been using Delete Me over the past 7 months. We've been telling you guys about that. It's been an awesome experience, a little alarming at the same time, however. Delete Me has been finding a lot of our personal information online and helping us to get it removed.
Something that we did not know before using Delete Me is there are data brokers out there that collect huge amounts of your personal identifiable information. They will use government sites, public information sites, and even your own social media. They will collect your social security number, your birthday, your addresses, even your family members. They will then package it all up, license it, and then sell it to other data brokers, corporations, or even scammers.
Yeah, just the last 6 months, Delete Me found over 100 different data brokers with our personal information. Their privacy experts took it from there. They've removed over 500 listings with our personal data, and the best part is they'll continue to scan the web, making sure our information doesn't pop up again. We signed up for the family plan. That way, all of our family members are protected under one plan. This can be especially important for some of your elderly family members, as unfortunately, they're so oftentimes a target for these scammers.
To give Delete Me a try and take the first steps towards protecting your personal information online, just click the link below or go to joindeleteme.com/GSL and remember to use our code GSL to get 20% off all consumer plans.
We want to thank Delete Me for sponsoring this episode of the podcast, and let's get back to our conversation with Ammon and Rachel.
Devastated.
So they got all of you on the bus and then delivered the news.
Yeah, and we were ready to have a fight about it.
Yeah.
We didn't, but we were ready. Everybody wanted to.
How little were some of the boys?
The boys in that group were 12 to 17.
It was a fight, I know, because one of my sisters was nursing her 12-month-old child, and they ripped her right off her breast. I mean, that's how big of a fight it was.
They took babies?
So the same
Screaming.
day that happened,
babies.
that they took us boys up to Boys Ranch, then they took all the mothers that had children 5 and older to the Wells Fargo Pavilion. All the mothers that had children younger than 5 went to the Coliseum. And the mothers at the pavilion, they called them into this other room and said, hey, we need to talk to you guys about something. Leave the children in this room, come into this other room. Well, they had around 80 police officers in that room. And once they had them in there, they're like,
You're not going
back to your children. You have to just go back to the ranch.
So they didn't get to say goodbye. There was no explanation.
No, and the cops were there blocking them off from their children, so they had no way to get back to them.
That was really mishandled.
And I think it was so mishandled because they had nothing against these mothers. And I think and these children are already so traumatized to get taken from their parents too. I mean, it just could have been handled so much better. It was just so painful, and the screams and the cries, and it just made so much hate from these kids toward the government and
so angry when it was
toward the world. They were just
trying to
stuck
yell
where it became full of hate.
into that room with their mothers. Don't do it. They're gonna separate us. Don't do it.
I can't even imagine the
It
trauma.
was just so awful. Those children became very hateful of CPS at that point. So in the Coliseum, they didn't know that happened because phones had been taken away from everybody, and there was no communication between any shelters.
Okay.
So the children in the pavilion were very angry and very rude to CPS from that point on.
Well, yeah, they'd been lied to and then had
And even when they broke them up in the pavilion, it was another massive trauma for them because when the children realized they were going to be separated from each other,
from their full siblings. And
they
would tear
all
them
gathered
apart
into
from
this
each other.
huge group in the pavilion, and the oldest girl surrounded them with locked arms.
And they had to pry
around
their arms
all
apart.
the little children, and the little children were just screaming and crying and begging them to not separate them.
They're literally ripping children out of the arms of the people that they trust.
The
their
only
family.
people they know.
Yeah.
And they think they're going to some terrible future.
Right. Yeah, total unknown.
Can we go back to the initial raid for a second just to paint a better picture of what that looked like? Because in some of the photographs and depictions that I've seen of what occurred there, it looked like pretty heavily armored personnel there with tanks, armored vehicles. Do you recall what was the first observation that was made from members of your church as far as them approaching and what their tactics were and all that?
I went and climbed up the grain elevator because it was one of the tallest things on that ranch, and I just heard there were police at the gate. So I climbed up there, and there was an armored personnel carrier up in the north of the property with several cop cars, and then on the south, which was the entrance to the land. We had a mile easement into the land. It looked like there were hundreds of cop cars out there blocking us off. So that's when I knew something way bigger was up than just some initial inquiry into what we were doing.
Right.
And then they moved in that night. They had a drone flying over the land constantly. And they brought a few SWAT teams in the first night, but the next morning is when just hundreds of cars came pouring in.
Did they disarm you guys?
We
We were unarmed people.
only my Uncle Isaac had some hunting weapons in a little safe
really?
because there was a lot of deer on the property. It
Yeah.
had been a hunting ranch.
Okay.
So he was the designated hunter. But that's all we had there.
Oh, okay. I didn't
We
know
were
that.
not
I assumed
unarmed
that
people.
FLDS would have been pretty heavily armed.
We
It's-
weren't.
it's-
We've never been. It's just never been the FLDS
Yeah.
way.
Huh. Okay.
So yeah, guns were never a big thing.
Well, I guess that probably prevented it from becoming like another Waco.
Exactly.
Right. There was nobody with
There was
guns
no
to
one
shoot.
to shoot.
Yeah.
him, I think.
And
They-
Uncle Isaac took the cops straight to a safe and said, "Here's our guns. This is all we got here."
So there was a lot of compliance initially.
And they didn't
Right.
believe, obviously. They were searching for guns. They were like, there's got to
Yeah.
be more arms, so they wouldn't believe that there was
Right.
no more guns there.
So I used to be in law enforcement, and my assumption would be that upon making entry into this property, that everything's being cleared house by house, room by room. Is that correct?
No,
They're
they came
pretty-
in to the school, and I don't know if they even had a search warrant to search the whole land at first. I think they would get information from the girls, or they went down and got in their journals in their classroom, which may have not been fully legal when they did it.
Yeah.
But because I remember I took pictures of that, and it ended up being a really big deal in court later that we actually had pictures that they did something before it was legal for them to search. But then they got search warrants based off of what they found,
Right.
and started searching more heavily. And then this girl that they claimed was claiming she was being abused, never turned up. So they intensified the search.
But even their whole story of it would take too long to find out if the call was legit wasn't
Right.
really true. They could have taken that effort instead of hurting. It was way more painful and costly to hurt all these people versus finding out if that call was legit.
Right.
And so you're talking about the original reporting party. Can you touch upon that and what the explanation or what your understanding of it is now?
What happened?
Yeah. So what prompted all of this?
Okay, I understand that a person in Colorado named Rosita Swinton called the CPS claiming she was being abused by a man named Dale Barlow, and claimed her name was Sarah Jessup Barlow, that she was 16 years old. I understand that she was actually in college in Colorado and had a history of making fraudulent calls like this.
Was she from your community?
Nothing.
No
Oh,
relation
she
to
was
our
just-
community.
Oh, wow.
So that's one thing we've always felt like was very unjust.
Very odd circumstance. What do you
Yes.
have your own theories as to maybe what actually
think it
occurred?
was-
I believe it was an excuse to come in.
I think it was an excuse because they wanted. I mean, this community is growing from ground up so fast. I mean, they've got to figure out what's going on.
Right.
And obviously, a little bit of good came. I mean,
Right.
Warren got put in prison, and children that Warren had separated from their mothers finally got to see their mothers at that time.
Right.
So it's just so. I mean, I think more damage was done. They obviously could have done it better and still had the same results.
Yeah, the real
if they went
question is-
after
Right.
the men
What's
instead of the children and
What's
mothers.
an honorable way they could have come in and got the evidence they needed for what
They easily could have
eventually
kept the
did?
mothers and children together.
Because the mothers and children, the men there offered to leave so the mothers and children could stay there.
Really?
And they said no to that.
And they said no. We were ready to do anything just to not break us up as families.
Now, CPS kind of tells a different story. They
Of
say
course.
that they told the mothers, you can stay with your children, but you need to leave the men, and that the women refused to leave the men. And that's why their children
Yeah,
were
that was
ruined.
not one bit true.
And a lot of families didn't know what was going on because once the raid started, everybody just stayed home. Nobody went anywhere on the land.
Yeah, and I know those mothers were willing to do anything to stay with their children.
Oh, yeah.
Unless they put requirements like, oh, you need to talk against Warren or something. They wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, nobody would
But
have
that
done
shouldn't be a requirement necessarily to stay with your kids.
Right.
Especially because I didn't think he had done anything wrong
Right.
at that time.
So what
Just-
happened to underage mothers? Did they get to go then with
They
their babies?
kept the underage mothers with their babies.
Because they were
Yes.
also minors.
Yes.
So
And they
that's-
claimed a lot of girls that weren't underage were at the time. Even people up to 28
Like
years old.
my sister,
named.
some of our sisters that were in their 20s, they'd say, "Oh, they're an underage girl," so they kept them.
And your ID is fake.
Yeah, they'd say all their birth because they had all their birth certificates and everything. They'd say it's fake.
So they would just pretend to be 17 or 16.
Yes.
No, the girls
the
did.
CPS
The
would
CPS
pretend
would say they
Oh.
were. They would say that their ID was fake,
Oh, okay.
even though it was state issued.
They were trying not to enable and facilitate.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that would have to be hard, I think, for the people that had those orders too, to watch that occur and not be the one putting the orders in.
I know.
I think it was hard on a lot of people involved, a lot of law enforcement and CPS. I don't believe they actually went along with what was going on.
Yeah.
Didn't some people actually walk away from it?
There were some that did, and there were some that I'm glad stayed and helped because they were very kind and tried to look out for us still. Like, I have lots of friends that I made during the raid that I really appreciate.
Yeah. Well, you guys were so isolated and you didn't have books. You didn't have movies. I mean, you did at one point, but then all that was removed. So when they took all these kids and put them in these holding facilities, were they trying to entertain you with stuff that you're like, no, we don't?
They wanted to, but we knew that we couldn't go back to Zion if we were looking at television, if we were reading novels and playing sports like sports the outside world plays. So we were really resistant to that because we didn't want Father to come back and say, well, you guys partook of the world, now you can't come back.
Right.
So we were very strict, and we thought they were trying to destroy our religion, so we wanted to keep true to our faith.
So did you think it was a trap?
Yes, absolutely. So we didn't, when we got taken to Boys Ranch, they took the TVs out to appease us. They took the novels out to appease us. And the toys eventually, but it was so much work to tend 72 boys.
Yeah, with nothing to do.
And we started playing games anyway. It was like, we can't just sit here and do nothing. So we're going to play games. And we had to, reason ourselves into it. It's okay because we don't have work to do. So we're going to play. When we go back home, we'll stop.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
So we started playing, and they brought us fishing poles and stuff. And there were some pretty fun ponds to fish in. We're like, well, it's probably okay to fish because we're here.
Yeah.
We won't when we go back, but it's okay while we're here.
Yeah. So as one of the older boys, did you feel a responsibility to make sure that you were keeping all the younger ones on the straight and narrow path?
I did, and I felt the pressure from all the parents to keep the boys on the straight and narrow at the same time. I was the oldest boy there.
Yeah. And you turned 18 while you were at the
I turned
Boys
18
Ranch.
at Boys Ranch.
So did they want to send you away when you turned 18?
They wanted me to stay there because I believe they felt like I held the group together really well, and they all wanted me to stay because they really were looking up to me.
How many brothers did you have there?
16 brothers.
Wow.
I can't remember if that's counting me or not, but there were 16 of us there. I had 7 of my younger brothers sleeping in my own room, and 4 of them went to bed every night. And they never missed a night.
That's sort of a little boy trait sometimes.
well,
like they have
especially
to
when they're
outgrow
going through
that.
trauma, I think it makes it
Right.
way
Yeah,
worse.
for sure.
A couple of them actually were almost over it when the raid started, but just all that trauma, it brought them back.
no.
It
How did-
was
how
it
did
was
that work?
rough.
So did you guys have to do all your own laundry and
We
everything?
did our own laundry almost the whole time we were up there, and my room stunk.
Yeah. Oh, that's a strong smell. You don't get it out. It doesn't come out of clothing
it
and
doesn't.
stuff.
No. So that was a big growing up thing for me because I'd been out on the crew for
He had to be a dad before
years
he
and
was a dad.
years.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's like, here, take care of the kids now.
You've had a lot of practice.
Get them up in the morning, get them
Yeah.
ready for the day, make sure they're fed, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it was a major change for me.
How long were you guys there?
Got there on April 14th, left on June 2nd.
And did you have any idea how long you were going to be there, or was it just a total mystery?
We didn't understand how CPS worked when we were taken, and we thought maybe the first court hearing, the judge will be like, okay, the kids should go back. This isn't right. So once that passed, then our attorneys came in and said, you're very unlikely to go home before 6 months.
Wow.
And because it's such a huge case, it's going to take longer. We're looking at 18 months. And we just refused to believe it. That was way too long. We just could not imagine being away from home and family for that long. And we were worried that it was just to make so we would slowly get used to the outside world and be like them, which, of course, in our culture was very wicked. Like,
Yeah.
that's the wickedest thing you could do. So we were afraid that was the purpose of the whole thing.
I believe there was people who thought they would integrate
Integrate.
integrate everyone into that. I mean, I'm sure there were some people, because it did feel like that a lot, But when you force people to do stuff
Right.
that maybe there was some right in it, but forcing that on people makes them hate it.
It made us feel like going against that whole thing, and it confirmed father's position
Right. It just
as the
made you
leader,
stronger in
and
that.
this is to test us, and if we pass it, we'll be more faithful. That was kind of the feeling as we went through it.
So I
And
don't
of
want to
course,
tell.
being something forced upon you makes you fight it, right?
Right.
More
of
resistance.
course. Yeah. Well, I don't want to tell everything
Right.
because this is like a journal and I
Right.
want people to enjoy it. And some of the stuff made me laugh out loud, like some of your stories.
Yeah, I
like
love
the
the
laundry.
funny scenes.
Like I was reading it last night and my son's like, because it was the word wrapped around his head. I'll save it for people when they buy the book. But I was like, oh God, so funny. So, I mean, there's pain in it and then there's laughter in it because you're just a bunch of young boys.
Yeah,
So
it's
obviously
great.
you guys are goofing around. So eventually you get told you're going home. What was that like? And then what was life like afterwards? And then I know there was a situation where you went to go visit your father afterwards and you had done all of this. You've kept these boys on the straight and narrow and he refused to see you.
So initially being told we get to go home was huge stress relief for me, because now I know I didn't have to take care of all these boys
Yeah.
every day. And I got out, went to San Antonio. Lots of our mothers had moved out of the ranch because they felt like they'd get their children back faster if they moved out. So Mother Nat and all of my mother's children, everybody moved to San Antonio. I went to visit Uncle Merrill and he said, you should go see your father and tell him all this stuff that happened. So he sent me to Kingman, and I get there and me and my grandmother go to visit him in Kingman, and he won't come see us. After a while, the guard comes back and says he doesn't want to see you. So I was a little bit shocked and just like, did I do something bad? You know, why is the prophet not wanting to see me? Then I went back, and it was hard, but I just couldn't figure out why. I didn't feel like I did something to make me unworthy. I mean, I barely got out of the hardest experience of my life.
And then you probably go backtrack. Did I do something wrong in the raid? I mean,
Right.
it's like,
Yeah,
did we
all
play
that.
too many games? I mean, you just think of all you put
What
yourself
did we
through all
do
this
that made
torture.
so he wouldn't let us see him?
So you've never gotten any clarity or an answer to that? No.
No.
Did he ever see you after that?
6 months later, he let me and my sister Lenora come see him.
But you're not allowed to ask. Like, why were you, what
no.
was that all about?
A visit with him just meant
You gotta
you
sit.
sit there while he talks about the gospel or whatever. It wasn't having a conversation at all.
Yeah, he
No,
had
how were
it
you?
was always third person. Like he would talk as though he was God.
The only
That's really
strange
all it
thing at that
was.
visit is he just kept saying, will you please forgive me for anything I've ever done?
That's because he's talking to our sister.
Yeah.
But were you aware
I didn't
of
know
anything
what
at
he
the time?
meant.
See,
I
there's
just
your
was
testimony.
like, what? Why is he saying this to us?
Yeah.
I thought he was a perfect man.
Do you think he was authentic in his remorse?
There may be a degree of it.
Maybe at times, I think, but he was never, it's like, I always think about how he would tell me, never say sorry to someone younger that you are over. He never, ever said, I'm sorry, just like that. Please forgive me. It was never, I'm sorry. It was always, forgive me.
Very vague.
Yeah, and he didn't say what for at all. It was just forgive me if there's something I did when you were younger.
It's weird because that puts it on you.
That's because he did do something to the sister that was with him.
Yeah. You were just unaware of that at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you ask afterward? Were you wondering?
I didn't wonder. I just wondered why. In my mind, it was like, why does he feel like he needs forgiveness? But it didn't ever occur to me that he could have done something, because he taught me so strictly as a child.
Right.
And people just believed he did as he taught.
Right. Yeah, that was a big thing in the group, is Uncle Warren lives as he teaches. And that's said to this day.
And that just burn your ears. Or
No,
you
yeah,
just
I
like,
was just like, no, he doesn't.
yeah. Just want to scream it from the mountaintops, but couldn't. Yeah. So life got weird then. After the raid, everybody's kind of back, but then the rules got more strict and more bizarre.
Yeah, so we had about a year where it was relaxed after the raid, but that there was so much court stuff, CPS stuff.
And that's where the children that Warren had taken from their mothers finally got to see their mothers.
Mothers coming that had been separated for years from their children. Wow. And that continued partly into 2010. By the end of 2010, he moved from Kingman to Utah State Prison. And that's when things started tightening back up, when he was in Utah State Prison. He started some new projects, putting deadlines on them, and designating more holy places that you had to get another blessing. I don't even remember if there's any special name for those blessings. It's just get this some sort of blessing that you can work on this project. And he built this little addition to his house that was supposed to be this holy place. As soon as that was done...
Was he not in Texas at this time? He was in Utah?
No, he was in Utah. Then he had to start that massive house that it's at least 72,000 square feet.
72,000?
72,000. It's 3 stories, and it's an H-shaped. It's just a hotel, pretty much. Has a few kitchens and several living rooms and dining rooms, and I don't even know how many bedrooms. It was so many bedrooms. Wow. And we framed it really strong. Everything's double-walled.
Wasn't it made out of cedar?
Just the outside has log siding on it. It's the first house that we just framed instead of stacking logs. But it was an intense project with temple-like deadlines that we could never have met.
Yeah.
We were supposed to get, if I'm remembering right, we had 3 months to build up, and we took 8.
You built that whole thing in 8 months?
Yes.
Wow.
And that's including cutting all the rock down and building a white concrete wall all the way around it, putting all the landscaping in and the trees.
How many men?
There was about 90 men at the apex of that project, I believe. That was the most men we ever had there.
So he really just kept the guys really busy all the time.
Yes. Yes, all those were tight schedules. And after
Sending them away in between.
that year while we were building it, he sent so many people away.
Yeah.
Because he put me in the school and said I was a principal. And the school had 300 kids. And the end of the school year, we had 100.
Wow.
So school was really stressful because you'd walk into the classroom one morning and there wouldn't be a teacher there to teach this class. So you'd have to go find a fill-in.
Or you would fill in.
Yeah, I filled in sometimes for the kids.
And people are just being sent away, just being accused of random things? Or
So he appointed you principal,
He appointed me principal.
which is a
of the
position
school.
that he was in himself at one point in time, correct?
Yes.
How did that feel, kind of walking in the same...
Well, I was told to do morning class, which is a devotional every morning before school starts, where you talk about religious principles. And the actual principal was supposed to work on the project and not do the school. So I was kind of a de facto principal. And then after a month or two, then he just said, "You are the principal now." So I just took the full responsibility for the school. I liked doing lots of stuff with the kids. That was fun.
Yeah.
But I didn't like how much oversight he had over it because I didn't feel like I had my autonomy when I was the principal. And even to ask an assistant or a teacher to come watch over this class or do a certain thing, I needed to report to him that I did that and to the bishop and get their approval for anything. Oh, wow. He'd always be like, "Don't you ever counsel any of the females. You have to go to the bishop if you want them to change anything they're doing and get him to say it or me to say it, not you."
How old was Warren at that time?
Gosh,
11. How old would he
I have no
been?
idea. He was 50-something, wasn't he? Yeah, he would have been 50-something.
Did you ever get the sense at any time that he was looking for somebody to take his spot down the road?
No, he always says,
If he
"There is
thought
not another
someone would-
person appointed besides me."
He
to
said
be
he
the
would be
leader."
the last prophet.
Yeah.
And
He'll be out of prison and he'll lead the people
And
to
if he
Zion.
ever-
That's still his thing.
Yeah, if he ever felt like any of the boys or anyone was feeling any authority at all, then he would send them away really fast.
He felt threatened by it. Interesting.
So, like, even Ammon in that position would have to show a lot of humility and reporting in and everything to
In
even get to
detail,
have
yeah.
Very
Give him every
subservient.
detail to
Yeah.
make sure that he still has full control of what I'm doing.
And so you were sent away several times as well. And weren't you kept in like one of those isolation houses or?
More than once, yeah. It started in summer of 2011 when he started sending me away and bringing me back. But 2012 was the worst year for me, probably for everybody in our family.
Yeah, it was.
Because I think I moved around 12 times that year to different places and to isolation.
And this
as a
is shortly
non-member.
after he got sentenced, right?
Yes.
And so it was like once he got sentenced in Texas, he was just so mean to everyone.
Even how he talked changed to
Yeah.
way more word salad.
And he would make it feel, he would send people away that you're not praying hard enough for me to be delivered. A lot of the times that's all it was.
You're doubting my
He was mad at
deliverance.
us for not having the faith to get him out of prison.
So do you think that he truly believed that your lack of faith is what got him convicted, or was he just angry?
I think he was just angry, and I think he'd gotten away with so much, and he had put himself so high that he almost couldn't believe that he had to pay for what he did.
Yeah. Do you think he's kind of gone crazy?
He's gotten nuts.
I think because
once he was convicted, then suddenly his language changed to where he used order, power, those words like all through a sentence.
Yeah,
Celestial,
and
holy order,
I think
power,
it was
way,
a lot just his conscience
just those kind of
catching up to him.
words.
So then he was trying to put himself higher and pretend more like he was. I mean, he just went weird.
And all the revelations started being really hard to understand
And
exactly what he
repetitive.
meant.
So when did you start to question where you're like, I just don't, I mean, because you were very devout.
Right.
At what point were you like,
Well, he kept trying to make me confess that I molested my sisters, and I didn't even quite catch on to what he was trying to make me confess. And so I wasn't doing it. And pretty soon he's like, "You're just a non-member, and you were such a violent person as a child to your siblings, and you won't confess to it." So he wouldn't let me be a member because I wouldn't confess to something I didn't have a clue what he was even trying to get me to. And he just left me out in the cold to see, I don't know if I would leave or not. And I tried really hard to think of anything in my life that possibly was making so God wouldn't let me be part of his church. And it was confusing because I had read church history in the LDS church history. I knew the doctrines that had been set up, and I knew that if somebody wanted to be part of the church, they came and asked for baptism and were allowed in. Instead, I'm being told, no, you can't have that. You're being held out. So that was really confusing to my mind. But it went to 2016, and he's wanted me to confess again in 2016. So I just worked in woodwork and that kind of stuff for a long time.
so you were out of the church, but you didn't leave?
It's
You're
not
told you're a
really-
non-member,
told you're a
but you're
non-member,
still
but
faithful.
It's like
Oh,
you're in the
okay.
church still, but you don't get the blessings of the church.
And you
Does that
have
make
to live
sense?
alone.
You don't get to hear his teachings unless you're in his family. Obviously, you'll hear some, but you don't get to hear the main teachings of the people. You don't get to take the sacrament. You don't.
Is this after you saw that newspaper article?
I saw that in 2008.
Yeah, because I think, because whenever someone found out something that Warren did, because he saw in a newspaper article, that he had
I saw a
committed
newspaper
fornication.
article. Basically, someone was talking about the raid in a comment under a news article, and they said, well, Warren confessed to fornication with a sister. And I read it, and I was like, of course that's not true. But later on, we were told, you can't have read anything against the prophet. It'll make you lose your testimony, and you need to confess. So I wrote, I read this about you, and I don't think it's true. Well, he comes back to me with a message that says, you are way in the wrong for even considering something that somebody said evil about the prophet.
But he had done stuff to his sisters. And so I think whenever someone found out stuff he did, then he was really hard on that person after that. Just really hard. And from that point on, I think he just was
And then
really hard on
within
him.
a month or two, he isolated me from everybody, sent me to Short Creek to live in an apartment, and wasn't supposed to have interaction with anybody at all. So I lived in this little apartment for 6 months without anybody else.
Wow.
And when I was in there, I had a car at first to go get woodwork, but I started driving up the canyons and going hiking.
But at that time, did you even think for a second, maybe I did find out something true, so that's why he's punishing me?
I didn't think that. I just, he made it sound like you had done some sort of sin that you needed to repent of. And it's just, this is taking you a long time to see if you'll do it right. That's more what the mentality was. But then when I told him, I went hiking up the mountain, and he had Lyle come take my car from me.
You told on yourself?
Yeah, but I didn't think he was
Yeah.
going to do that.
Right.
I was just like, I don't have anything to do and I'm trying to keep my mind straight. So I went hiking.
Yeah.
And instead he said, you should never go on outings. That's evil. And you can't have a vehicle anymore. And Lyle needs to check on you every morning or through the day, anytime he wants to see if you're doing what's right.
Wow. Did you ever try sneaking out like naughty Rachel over here?
I lived right.
Saw me somehow.
I lived right by the creek, so I would hop my fence and just wander up and down the creek, and that was fun.
You guys are both
Sometimes through there,
escaping.
he was building furniture and he brought me some.
So that was earlier than this
Oh.
period where Rachel was living close to the Jeffs block, and we went and picked up our meals from the Jeffs block. So we'd be waiting for our meals, and we'd drive over where Rachel was and see her and her kids.
But
real
we
quick.
weren't supposed to see each
No,
other.
we weren't supposed to see each other.
Yeah.
But
That's that strong streak, the stubborn streak in you guys again.
So there wasn't necessarily any one moment per se where you really just
no, because I was deeper into the doctrine than just into him, but I still had that, I don't know what you call it, indoctrination that he was the prophet and there's not somebody else to replace him. So he must be in there for persecution. And he sent me away in 2016, and it's when I wouldn't confess again to that. And I actually wrote to him, I've confessed everything to you already.
What do you want me to say? So you had to basically lie and confess to doing something that you
That's
didn't
what he
do.
wanted me to do,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So he sent me far away, but he said, don't get on the internet, send any extra money you have so that you can be restored to the church. So he still had that there. And, he gave a lot of restrictions to me when he sent me far away. But in a way, it was fun to be out from under the control and not have somebody breathing down my neck anymore. So I went to Minnesota for 9 months. Nobody had my phone number. Nobody knew where I was. And I worked at Marvin Windows up by Canada in Warroad by Lake of the Woods and worked in a toboggan shop, which really was fun. And the man, John Herron, worked there. He was just one of the best people I've ever met. So he was really encouraging to me through that time period. I don't even know if I'd have made it without him.
Wow.
Because it was very depressing. Trying to figure out what did I do so bad that I can't even talk to not only my family, but my people.
right.
How am I such a bad influence on them that I'm going to make them leave? Because that was what was implied, is that's why you have to go, is to protect the rest of the people.
Right.
So in 2017, I get a call and find out they had been searching for me, and he had said I was supposed to come to these meetings in Short Creek. So I drove back to see what it was because the man that called me had been sent away forever. So I was like, is this apostates trying to trick us into something? But I decided to go see anyway. So I came there and went to a meeting, and it was obviously him sending more revelations and gathering a group of people back together. He told us none of us had priesthood. We were all non-members. And the first things they read were okay, but he had all sorts of prophecies in there about destructions that were just about to happen. And within a few meetings, then there were dates being set. But he sent a message to me and my brother Jake that we had to get sent away again. He didn't say any details. So I gathered up my younger brother and we went to Nebraska and did pivots for about 4 weeks. And then he said we could come back. And I didn't like it because it felt like whiplash, where you go, now you got to quit your job. And how do you explain that to your employer, where they don't have a clue where you came from and what you're doing?
So when you would go off, and you never said you were part of the FLDS or anything like that? No one knew who you were?
In Nebraska, they did. And in Minnesota, a lot of people found out because they would go look my name up and find out who my dad was. I shouldn't say dad, who my father was. Anyway.
Wow.
But John Herron was really nice, and he knew who my father was, but he never told me he knew, and he never treated me different for it. So
And that's, I think, makes the biggest difference.
That-
When people are just kind and help you see there's good people out here. I think for those kind of people, just finding out there's good people out here, it just helps you realize maybe the world's not so bad. Maybe I haven't been told the truth about everything.
Yeah, and I knew he was a good man. I had no question. And he gave me lots of counsel that I wish I would have got from a dad growing up. He even told me, when you're ready to get married, wait for that girl to come find you. She'll come find you.
Yeah.
And that's what happened later.
So tell us, okay. So I want to get to that part of the story.
Right.
So when did you know in your head about the sins of your father? Like, how did that happen, and when did you decide I'm leaving?
When we came back to the meetings in 2017, he started saying billions of people were being lifted off this earth to some other planet, and there was only 10% of the planet's population left.
Oh.
And we're like, where's all the real
Nothing's
estate?
changed.
Yeah.
Where's all these extra cars? Something's not adding up here. I go to Salt Lake, I go to Denver, and there's still 5 million people there. Because it got to where he said there's only 5 million people in the United States. I'm like, they're following me around because I'm seeing them still. So
Were you trying to believe? Did you actually try to believe it?
when he first said they're lifted away, we're like, okay, is this real?
Yeah.
And we kind of looked around trying to see if it was, but nothing added up.
Didn't add
So
up.
I was like, okay, something's weird.
Yeah.
He's not right, and he may be out of his head.
Right.
And then he cut us off from the meetings, and we just kept working. And he started them again, but didn't let me come back. And whoever went to him would avoid me. So I was like, okay, he said something about me. I'm not even sure what it was, but it must be pretty bad. And life kind of went like that for the next 5 years, where we just worked out here, building pole barns and doing construction. In 2021, then we bought a place up in Star Valley, Wyoming, because we were ready to just settle down. We were sick of driving all over and not having a home and waiting for the prophet to come tell us what to do, because it was time to just live life. And I had a bunch of sisters leave. So my question was, why did they leave? They were the people talking to my father. They know what he's saying every day. I don't get to hear anything. He doesn't think I'm worthy to hear what he's saying. So I got one of my younger brothers that had heard some of the meetings and said, what was he saying in them? And he didn't want to tell me because they'd covenanted to not reveal a single word they'd heard. I said, if what he told you didn't happen, it's not sacred. You can just tell me. So he starts telling me the crazy things they'd been told about, like Kansas City, Missouri had been wiped completely off the face of the earth, and other parts of this earth had come and it had been made bigger, and all sorts of things that I knew were absolutely false.
Yeah.
And he told us that Father claimed we were being on drugs and we were committing all sorts of prostitution and everything. So I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. And something's really messed up with him. And then my sister, my full sibling Melanie, came and told us how she told me a lot of things he was saying about this drugs and people being hallucinating and committing all sorts of crimes and people being lifted away and forgetting what they did. So I was like, why are we listening to what he's saying? Why are we trying to obey him? Maybe he's messed up a little bit and we should wait and see. And that's kind of where I stood in, say, 2021, 2022. In 2023, 2022, my brother Helaman comes and tells me that he's being given drugs. They have some informant that told
That
him
Warren's being given
that
drugs.
FBI is giving my father drugs. And that's why he's saying crazy things. So I'm like, are you guys going to do anything about it? And they weren't. They're like, it's still the word of the prophet, so it's true. And Melanie told me that if they were to say anything about it, then he would just send them away and say they were very wicked. So I was like, okay, well, he thinks I'm bad, so I'm going to do something about it. So I write to Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas. I send a message to his office, like, people are telling me that FBI is giving my father drugs and making him say crazy things, and he's calling his family and telling them crazy things, and they're all trying to believe him. And then I didn't hear anything for a while. I thought, okay, they probably just threw my message away, but I really want to know.
Yeah.
And about 3 weeks later, Father calls the people in North Dakota and it's like, Ammon, wrote this letter to the prison officials saying I'm on drugs and
How
saying
did it
crazy
get back to him?
things.
Because the governor investigated.
Oh.
Saying crazy things. So he sends them this message, tell Ammon that I am not on drugs. I do not take drugs. I don't even take any medications from the doctors or anything. And you can ask my mother, you can ask my sister Rachel, you can ask Josephine and Hannah, who are my younger sisters, if I'm a normal person. And then he's like, you know you're on drugs. You know that you've been committing adultery and doing horrible things with wicked women. He worded it like that. And then he went on to tell the other people in the family that Levi and I had been killing hundreds of people.
That's where all those people were going with you two.
So
Oh my gosh.
I was like, okay, that didn't work very good.
Yeah.
But at least I can know that I did my part, and now I don't have to care what he says.
Right, because now
Now
you're
he
being
knew.
accused of stuff you obviously know you're not doing.
So I'm like, I don't have to care what he says. And
But he also knew, I mean, of course, for us out here, we know the prisoners' rights, all these things. No one would ever take their time and effort to go drug him. But for them, they really didn't know. And
We
so
didn't know.
it-
And-
Right.
But now he knew that he wasn't under any influence. He was just going crazy because he was so guilty and everything.
And the mentality in the FLDS is that everybody's trying to kill Warren Jeffs. They're just trying so hard they just can't quite do it. Every time they about get to it,
Because
then
that's what he has told everybody.
God frustrates their purposes and it doesn't work out. So that's the mentality in the group. They think everybody's constantly out to hurt him instead of realizing that they really don't care.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, they don't care enough to even stop him from the crazy calls.
Yeah,
and
I was
stuff
kind
he
of wondering
makes.
why he's allowed to do that because he's still really
It's just his prison rights.
Oh,
But he
man.
sent a message a few weeks later telling me and Levi to leave Wyoming and just go far east and repent. And if we would confess to doing all the things he accused us of, he would probably let us back and have a family. And I was just like, not on my life.
He wanted you to admit to being a serial killer and then he'd let you back in the church. Makes sense. Then he'd be like, see, I told you.
And two times he said that, you know, go far away, leave everybody, have no communication, and you'll have a chance. And it's just like, no, I'm not going anywhere. And then circle to 2023, then my sister ends up telling me that he had molested her. And that's when the bottom of my world dropped out because I never thought he would have done that.
And this was a sister that was still staying faithful.
Yeah,
but
she's still
is
being
faithful.
faithful.
Really?
Wow.
And she tells me that she is molested. And I'm like, he was trying to get me to confess this to him because he wanted to throw me out. And I knew if I did, that was the end. I'd be out forever. I could never come back. And yet he did it. So I was so stunned. It took me like 3 weeks to just wrap my mind around all the crazy things that happened to me over the last 10 years and how it came to be that it actually was him. So it was really hard to take at first. And I thought about it, and I went to the Bible and read, okay, did Jesus say something about what happens to people if they molest children? So I find it in the
Yes, he
Bible.
does.
I'm like, Jesus says they should have a millstone hung about their neck and they cast into the sea. I was like, well, he didn't say except for fathers. So obviously that applies to him.
Yeah.
And I knew I could never think of him the same anymore.
Right.
This is so much worse than I could have ever thought it was, even though I thought things were getting really crazy. My sister tells me, this happened to me, this happened to Rachel, this happened to Nora. And by the way, Nora said I could use her name. So it didn't happen as bad as Rachel and Nora said it did. They're exaggerating. And
This is what our sister told you.
Our sister told us that. And I'm sitting there in my mind like, how does she know? Because we don't talk to Rachel and Nora. We don't have a clue what they said. We didn't read their book. We didn't read Rachel's book. We're just making things up. So I kind of thought through that. I was like, well, I'm going to buy Rachel's book and read it. Then I'm going to find her number and call her and ask her what happened to her. But I'm not going to tell her I read her book just to see if her story matches. Because I've been told for years that Rachel wrote a book, but it's all lies. So I bought her ebook and I read it in one setting. And I was just horrified. By the time I was done reading it, I was like, I know he's not he doesn't have anything that he claims he has. He hasn't seen Jesus, and he's not a prophet. He's not worthy to be our leader. And then I emailed Rachel and said, will you call me? So like 10 o'clock that night, she calls me and we talked till 2 or 3 in the morning.
First time we'd really talked.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
End of May or 1st of June of 2023,
Yeah.
we talked. And then the next day, I talked to Nora for about 5 hours too, just getting the story and trying to put all the pieces together. But I felt like chains falling off of me. That's the best way I can explain it.
It is. It's just like all
Layers and layers of buildup of years of stress and heartache starts to just fall off of you. And you're like, I can start to live now. I can get out
love
of this
my family. Gosh.
wagon rut.
And keep 'em.
I can, I can start communicating with all these people that I'd been told were evil. And they're not. And they're still good people. And they're not out to kill us. That's
Did you get told that I was out to kill you?
Everybody thinks that the people that leave are out to destroy unto bloodshed.
Wow.
The FLDS people, and that's the mentality that even helps them stay in.
Yeah, and that would keep people away from them because
Correct.
you instill that fear that these people are so evil.
So I start talking to them, and it's like, I'm going to be happy again.
Yeah.
And I can go find a wife, and I don't have to sit here and wait for Father anymore. I'm just done. I've been wanted to be married since I was 18, 19 years old.
So how did that? So your wife left the FLDS as well.
Correct.
He
So
actually helped her leave.
I had a little farm business I had started with my brother on his property, moving chickens, doing pasture-raised chickens, turkeys, sheep. And I made a Facebook account so I could promote my business. And after a month or so, then I get this friend request from an account, a person named Sarah Steed. No picture, no info, no posts. And I'm like, I don't want all these fake followers following me, so I probably shouldn't accept this. And I thought about it all day. I'm like, okay, whatever. Maybe this is a girl I know. So I accepted it. And kept going about my work. And one day I put a bunch of pictures of the farm life and one picture of me. And that evening at 7, she's just like, hi. I'm like, hi. How you doing? I'm like, just doing my farm. And she said something like, that's great. I said, I'm afraid you're a fake account and you're one of my brothers just spying on me to see what I'm doing. And she's like, I'm not. But I don't want to tell you who I am. So I just spilled to her everything I found out. And I didn't know who she was. But I was like,
Wow.
if this is one of my brothers,
I
then
might as well tell him.
he's going to hear everything from me. If he's trying to spy on me, I'm just going to tell him everything I know. So I just went through it all. Finally, I'm like, you have to tell me who you are. I gave you way too much information. So she didn't want to. She's like, I'm going to get in trouble if somebody finds out I'm on the internet and using Facebook. I'm like, I'm not going to tell anybody. So she finally tells me that her name's Jennifer Holm and she's only 1 year younger than me. I'm like, hey, you need to call me. So a couple days later, she started calling me and we'd talk like 4 or 5 hours every night.
Wow.
Pretty soon it was like, we have to meet each other. So
And she's still in the church at this time.
And she's working for a church company, living with people in the church. Her parents had left 10 years previously.
Oh, wow.
But she had
and
stayed
she was
in.
kind of staying with quite a prominent figure in the church.
So she didn't want them to find out she was talking to me. So we were keeping it really under wraps because I was like, until we decide what we're doing, then if they find out you're talking to me, they'll just kick you out and you'll lose your job, your house, whatever. So we'd figure out a reason to meet up and I'd go halfway down. She'd come halfway up and we'd meet in Provo Canyon.
How was that first meeting? And so do you have any idea what she looked like or anything?
Yeah, she sent me a picture and I sent her a couple of pictures of me. And then I said, I'll trade you some chicken for beef because she said she could trade me chicken for beef. I was like, yeah, okay. Nice reason to meet.
That's a good pickup line. I'll trade you some chicken for beef.
So I bring a cooler full of chicken and she brings a cooler full of beef and we meet in Provo Canyon and, we swap coolers and then I was like, let's go for a ride. So we went up the mountain and had a good time and everything.
Scary, but you guys were 30.
We were, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was fun though. It was like this feels right. And it's
Yeah, it
so
feels
fun to
good,
just
like,
start
this is
liking somebody.
natural.
We
Yeah.
just clicked. Like,
Dating.
we grew up believing we'd be called into a room, set down by somebody we didn't know and married and, live with them forever. That's what your life's going to be like. So suddenly we're talking to each other on our own free will and choice. And it felt so much better.
Was there any part of you that had any reluctance in that in those
No.
times? Not at all.
I felt like I had my free agency back.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's that realization when you realize Warren did these terrible things that I would never even think of doing. So I can do the normal thing and get me a wife and not feel guilty about it because he actually did terrible things.
Yeah.
So when you were done, you were done. You abandoned
was
the entire
done.
ideology.
Yeah, I knew he wasn't. Yeah, I could let go of everything. And it's a healing process, and you got to peel the good from the
Layers.
bad because, you had a lot of good things you were taught.
Sure.
The honesty, treating others right, believing, whatever your religious beliefs are, you can still choose to believe in God. And I wanted to keep all that and yet let go of all the messed up doctrine and twisted things he had taught.
Well, and that's where you kind of learn, I just need to go to the foundation of God rather than all these made up things that we were taught. And I think that's the unraveling.
And it really takes time. It really does. It's
Right. Sure.
amazing.
To
But
separate.
it's, at the same time, it's relieving. It's like letting off a little pressure here and a little pressure there. And at first it's hard, but then it gets kind of fun to do.
Yeah.
It's honestly because it's still relatively new for
It
you.
really
Yes,
is.
it is.
It's one of the more fascinating things about you because you're having to reacclimate into I guess I'd call it the real world.
Right.
But the way things that
Really is.
And it's really fun to have somebody to do it with.
Yeah.
for sure you're
experience.
They're both
discovering all
doing
that
it
together.
together.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So what has that process been like for you? Has it ever become overwhelming at times?
At first, it was really hard to separate Father from good because he was so much everything. I mean, when I was about 13, he started teaching, when you first say your prayers every day, pray for him before anything else. And so it really was our life. I got up to please Father. I went to men's prayer to please Father. I obeyed to please Father. And you got to take that out, but still be good, because he also taught you to be honest, to tell
But
the
now you
truth,
get to do
to
it for
be
you.
kind.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just a overwhelming at first, but I'll say after about 2 months, then it wasn't anymore, and it just felt good
Yeah.
to process through something because little things trigger. Okay, why did I think that person was bad? They're really not.
Yeah.
They're a child of God, and you process through your whole thing why you thought that, and you put the finger on the problem and you sweep it away.
Yeah. So you guys kind of secretly decided to get married. You didn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
This was
we went up
romantic.
we went up a ski lift, Sundance Mountain Resort down in Utah. Went clear up, and we were in the shadows of Mount Timpanogos, and that's when I said, "Will you marry me?"
Which you never thought you'd get to utter those words in your life.
Never. No way. I never thought I would get to. And it was just really fun. And of course, she's like, absolutely, yes.
And she left the night before your wedding?
And yeah, so we planned the wedding pretty fast because I was getting a place that she could come live at, and she was trying to not let on. So the night before she wanted to tell her employer she was leaving. And I was like, you got to make it just 10 minutes. Don't let him sit there and drag you into this conversation. And so we practiced with each other what to say and how to react and everything. And so she was just all ready, and she goes to him. And he wouldn't have it. He wouldn't hear it. And he sat there and dragged it on and on and on. And it gets to an hour and a half. And I'm like, something's wrong. Is he trying to convince her to dump me? And she wouldn't answer me. And I was texting her like, what's going on? Tried calling her.
And that's scary for Ammon because
Yeah, I'm like, is he?
they've
Because he's
made
trying to
this
take her from
commitment
me.
to each other, but he knew the pressure she was going to have to go through.
I knew he'd
to
try
get
to
away.
keep her from doing it and tell her, your eternal salvation's at stake. You're about to lose everything over a stupid choice. That was what she was hearing. Finally, she calls me in tears and she's like, I don't know what to do. I just don't know what to do. And he said this and this and this. I'm like, Jen, compare the feeling you felt when he talked to you to when we were met and decided to get married. And she's like, it felt so much better when we decided to get married. It's like, well, which one do you want? And she said, I want that. I was like, okay, then you've got to leave tonight, because he demanded she come to him the next morning and have another talk with him. I was like, just leave tonight.
Right.
You know, I'll get a place ready for you, whatever. So she gathered her stuff up and drove halfway up that night. And then I went down the next morning and got her. And we got married the next day after that.
It's amazing.
It was just such a huge relief for us. And we're always like, the only thing we regret is not making it happen faster and sooner.
So that's great. Congratulations on your marriage. That's fantastic. You're having your first child.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. That's so awesome to us, because we hoped and dreamed about it for years.
Do you guys know what you're having?
We don't yet. We're at 18 weeks right now.
Oh, about to find out. Or are you going to keep it a surprise?
I think so, but we'll see. We'll see. We're probably going to be like, I don't know if we can wait another 20 weeks.
Yeah. Oh, that's so exciting. Well, congratulations. It's such a great thing to hear of people getting out of something that is so controlling and so ingrained in them. So what would be your message? What do you want other people to know that aren't in the community? What do you want people to know that are still in the FLDS?
First thing is, I'd like everybody to know what Father has done. Not because we want to tear him to pieces, but because it's important they know what their leader has done that disqualifies him from that position. And then to know that they can come out here and heal. They can make good choices. They can still believe in God. They don't have to throw all that away. They're taught if they leave, they'll become the darkest people on earth. And that's just not true. They can become a better person if they leave than if they stay in. And I've never regretted for a moment leaving. I was taught I would, never have. It's only made me happier. And nothing's so joyful as having your agency, your free agency, and the ability to love who you choose to love. That's what I want people to know. You can come out here and make good choices. You can still be a blessing to others. Mm-hmm. It is a big thing taught in the FLDS to bless others. And you can still do that, and you can bless yourself, and that's a good thing to do too.
Yeah, you can take care of yourself. It's a good thing to do. In fact, you got to do it first to be able to take care of other people.
If you believe that loving your neighbors yourself is important, you better love yourself. Enough to love your neighbor as yourself.
That's very true.
Wise words.
Yeah, very true. Well, I love that. And I'm so glad that neither one of you guys have lost your faith in God. And I'm glad that you're able to experience the true love of God and the true freedom that he's given us all with free will to make our own decisions and to have a real connection with our Creator. So.
Right. And that you can hold on to the good and let go of the bad.
It's possible
and you're
to
not
peel that
truly
onion.
free. We got taught we were free. We're not free. You don't know what freedom is until you really find that connection with God for yourself.
And then you'll never want to let it go.
Right.
Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful message.
Love
Love
it.
what you had to say there. I'm going to start winding this down.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to include? Obviously, we'll plug your book again here. Where is it people can find it, or how they can reach you through social media, or?
I'm on social media, Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever you call it, and Facebook, under my name and Mountain Valley Pastures, because I'd been doing a regenerative farm and we're slowing down a little bit, but we're going to pick that back up and keep going. It's just really awesome to do that farm homestead type of living.
Yes.
Yeah.
You follow Joel Salatin? And
I
his
follow
methods?
Joel Salatin. Oh, he's my saint.
Oh, amazing.
We love Joel Salatin.
We're in talks to have him on next month. So
Oh my
we're really
goodness.
excited.
That's awesome.
Yeah. He's been a huge inspiration for us too. You started talking about tractoring chickens and everything. And I was like, oh yeah, that's how we built our first chicken tractor and the rabbits and all that. That's really neat. Yeah. He's got it figured out.
Yeah, Joel Salatin's been an absolute inspiration for me. And just to see the bigger picture of the world too.
Yes.
He's been such an inspiration.
He's going to be speaking out here in Idaho.
Really?
Yeah, in Coeur d'Alene at the end of June.
Modern Homesteading
At the
Conference?
Modern Homesteading Conference. So yeah, Joel Salatin, like one of their
Okay.
keynotes.
I better look for his schedule.
Yeah.
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 Very cool. Well, big thanks to the both of you once again for being here. Rachel, Ammon, absolute pleasure, honor. Love your message. Really the both of you are very brave, whether you want to acknowledge it or not.
Yeah.
The things that you are so forthcoming about is so incredibly inspirational. And again, we want to thank you for being here. So thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.